Let's continue discussing extracts from His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada's letters on the subject of the distribution of his books. Although Srila Prabhupada saw all programs in Krishna consciousness being important, and they're all absolute, if done for the pleasure of Krishna, they're all transcendental, but there's no doubt that Srila Prabhupada most emphasized on the distribution of his books. This is a unique one. There are many quotes in which Srila Prabhupada emphasized the distribution of his books, but this one is unique, and I'll explain why. It's simple. Srila Prabhupada wrote, distribute as much literature as possible, English, Hindi, and Gujarati. That is real preaching. By as much literature as possible, Srila Prabhupada means his books, not just any silly books you can find in a bookstore. But this is particularly significant because it was written to Vasudeva Prabhu, who was a Gujarati businessman on the island of Fiji, very rich man, who had become aware of Srila Prabhupada and his disciples and wanted to invite Srila Prabhupada to Fiji. And Srila Prabhupada went there, and Srila Prabhupada encouraged Vasudeva Prabhu to build a temple there, an ISKCON temple, which is still there, the Krishna Kaliya temple. Why Krishna Kaliya? In the whole of the world, at least in the ISKCON world, I don't know of any others anywhere else either, only there is a temple of Krishna and Kaliya, Krishna dancing on the hoods of Kaliya. Why is that? Because it's said that Kaliya, after being chased out of Vrindavan by Krishna, came to Fiji and still resides there, apparently in the forest, in the deep, dense jungle there, he still resides there. So Krishna had a temple commissioned there of Krishna Kaliya. But then Srila Prabhupada wrote to Vasudeva to distribute his books. Now, this is similar to what Srila Prabhupada did in India, because the main preaching field there in Fiji was among Indians. The population was approximately 50% Indian and 50% indigenous. And naturally, the Indians were showing most interest. So as in India, Srila Prabhupada wanted his books distributed very widely, but he also wanted some temples established to establish the authenticity and importance of his movement. But then Srila Prabhupada also said in India, having established a few temples or having gone well on the way to having finished building them, Srila Prabhupada said that the most important preaching here in India will be massive book distribution. So the same thing in Fiji. Srila Prabhupada wanted it in 3 languages. The 3 languages there in Fiji which were required for book distribution, the main languages there, English, Hindi, and Gujarati. And Srila Prabhupada said that is real preaching. Distinguishing, it seems, between simply building a temple, which certainly has its role in preaching. Srila Prabhupada was very aware of that, especially in India, where there are Indian population. But Srila Prabhupada thought that simply to build a temple in and of itself does not constitute preaching. He wanted books distributed very widely. And as I've said many times, my personal experience here in India was that when I first came in 1976, and it was very, very difficult to even open your mouth and say anything about the personality of the Absolute Truth. Thick, thick Mayavad pervaded everywhere. Maybe there were pockets of Sri Vaishnavas and Madhvas. And certainly people were worshipping Krishna, but the Mayavad impersonal conception was so deep. That's changed now. Not that the influence of Mayavad is gone by any means, but at least you can preach openly that the Supreme is a person and that person is Krishna. How has that come about? I attribute it to the massive distribution of Srila Prabhupada's books. And as I've said many times also, that sometimes devotees ask me to write a book against Mayavad. I'm known as an author within our society. And I say, well, there's no need. We have Bhagavad Gita as it is. It's so strongly against Mayavad. And that has its own authority also, being Bhagavad Gita and not some book written by some unknown Bhakti Vikasa Swami. And of course, Srila Prabhupada's authority is there also. There is a book called Pushpajali, written by my godbrother, our godbrother, Patita Pavan Prabhu, in which he, in a semi-story form, puts together all arguments that he learned from Srila Prabhupada against Mayavad, and that makes a small book. So that's a valuable preaching tool. Anyway, a valuable preaching tool, it's could be distributed widely, and it's also good for our devotees to bolster up their preaching arsenal with the weapons of dozens of analogies and logical arguments showing that this idea that all is one is absolute poppycock at best. This letter to Vasudeva is written on the 3rd of November 1976. I'll follow that with an extract from a letter to Rameshwara Swami at the time, 7th of November 1976, just 4 days later. Srila Prabhupada wrote many letters to Rameshwara Prabhu, encouraging the already intensely enthusiastic Rameshwara to further stoke up the fire of book distribution. Srila Prabhupada wrote to him, "Our main business is to distribute my books." And Rameshwara, he already had taken that fully to heart. And it was simply to stoke up his fire of enthusiasm even more that Srila Prabhupada wrote that to him. And of course, when Srila Prabhupada wrote this to Rameshwara, you can be sure that Rameshwara was relishing that letter, and he was going to read that and circulate that to all others also. Our main business is to distribute my books, and people will come gradually. We have this experience also that we try to make devotees in so many ways. But if we simply distribute Srila Prabhupada's books, then as if by magic, it's actually Krishna's magic, people just start to come. They may have had the books, they may not have had the books, but the effect is such that Krishna reciprocates. Our main business is to distribute my books, and people will come gradually. That gives the idea people come and join us. It gives also the idea that gradually the whole populace will come to accept the teachings in Srila Prabhupada's books. We've seen that the massive distribution of Srila Prabhupada's books has had its effect in society. Vegetarianism has become largely accepted as a social alternative. Belief in reincarnation and karma, which wasn't there in the West in the early 1970s, hardly. Either vegetarianism or belief in reincarnation and karma, it was hardly there at all. If at all it was considered something very fringe and something odd and strange and something wrong there. So the widespread distribution of Srila Prabhupada's books has gradually brought people closer to accepting some basic principles of Krishna consciousness, but we need to distribute more. Prabhupada said everything should be done for that purpose. Everything should be done for that purpose. So that means establishing our temples, going out on Harinam Sankirtan, doing our sadhana. Everything should be done for that purpose. Then, in the same month, 23rd of November 1976, to another of Srila Prabhupada's stalwart leaders at the time, Balavanta, his very name gives the idea of a strong leader. Srila Prabhupada wrote to him, I am very glad to hear how the book distribution is increasing more and more. Srila Prabhupada didn't say this once, he said it again and again and again. And we can be sure as we go on increasing the book distribution more and more that Srila Prabhupada is still pleased. Srila Prabhupada said in this letter, this is our greatest weapon. Srila Prabhupada repeatedly in his books, in his letters, in his personal talking, he repeatedly gave martial analogies. He compared the preaching of Krishna consciousness to declaring a war on the material energy. And in that war, the devotees are the soldiers. Srila Prabhupada is the general. He didn't say that, but we took him like that. And Srila Prabhupada said, he wrote in one letter that our temples are not meant to be places for eating and sleeping. How much did Srila Prabhupada emphasize this? But as bases from which devotees go out to fight against Maya. Fight against Maya means to drop millions of books in the laps of the conditioned souls. Just like in the wartime, the bombs are raining like anything. Srila Prabhupada had that experience. And the books are our weapons. Powerful books. They explode in people's minds and shatter people's misconceptions. They destroy Maya. This is our greatest weapon. The more the books are distributed, the more the ignorance of the age of Kali will be smashed. Sometimes we wonder, people are so far from Krishna, they have so many wrong ideas. How is it possible that we're going to preach? We need to do this, we need to do that. We need to invent this program, we need to invent another program. No, we don't have to. We have to distribute Srila Prabhupada's books. We have to follow the standard programs which Prabhupada gave. For preaching, Prabhupada gave book distribution, massive book distribution. Public Harinam should not be neglected. The Yoga Dharma. Festivals. Prasad distribution, but especially we have to distribute these books. Now, in December of 1976, a letter to the legendary Tamal Krishna Goswami, Srila Prabhupada wrote, you proposed to induce the American people to surrender to Lord Chaitanya. That's thinking big. Inducing the American people to surrender to Lord Chaitanya. Who's thinking nowadays of inducing the American people to surrender to Lord Chaitanya? Srila Prabhupada was. He very much was. And he communicated that enthusiasm, that sense of possibility, the sense that, yeah, it can be done. By Krishna's grace, the impossible becomes possible. Srila Prabhupada communicated that to his disciples. So let me reread this. You propose to induce the American people to surrender to Lord Chaitanya by expansion of book distribution. That was the means. That is the way it should be done. And Prabhupada, I'll finish the whole sentence, by expansion of book distribution, that is wanted. In other words, Srila Prabhupada is saying, you want to have the American people surrender to Krishna by book distribution? Yes, this is the right program. When you come to that, that is success. Then you can take charge of the government. Thinking big. And as soon as in America the Krishna conscious boys are in power, the whole world will be changed. So you may think, well, I'm just standing here distributing a few books. Nothing much is happening. But Srila Prabhupada saw in that the possibility of changing the whole world by distributing books in America and then taking over the government. Srila Prabhupada's plan for taking over the government wasn't by some kind of military coup, but it was by distributing books. People become favorable to us, they'll vote us into power, and then we take control of the government. Srila Prabhupada is openly thinking like this. Srila Prabhupada continued in this letter, the idea is to bring under control all atheist class of men. There are two ways of bringing the opposition under control. One is by logic and philosophy. The other is by force. That was done by Bharat Maharaj when he was king of this planet. So by force, the king takes charge of the planet. But Srila Prabhupada wanted to bring the atheistic opposition under control by logic and philosophy as presented in his books. And probably whoever is listening here shares with me that experience we have in reading Srila Prabhupada's books, that they make such sense. Logic and philosophy. What about deity worship? We have to maintain deity worship standards. It's not that we just throw out everyone on book distribution and no one worships the deity. You have deities, you have to worship them. In one letter, Srila Prabhupada wrote, I believe it was to Sri Govinda, who was temple president in Chicago, which was the main hub of book distribution, or one of the main hubs of book distribution in America. Oh, Hare Krishna Airport. Tranakata Prabhu wrote a book called Oh Hare Krishna Airport. So Srila Prabhupada wrote that you can send the whole temple out on book distribution, just leave one person behind to worship the deities. But Srila Prabhupada wanted that the temple standards should be maintained also. But that doesn't mean that you have to put everyone in deity worship. Rather, Srila Prabhupada wrote in this letter, 28th of December 1976, to Kuru Shrestha, without book distribution, the temple worship standard will also diminish. Therefore, both of them should go on side by side. Yeah, unless the book distribution is going on, unless there's that enthusiasm generated in the preaching, the temple's worship stand will also diminish. If we don't have new people coming from book distribution, and the pujaris also feel, why should I bother dressing the deities nicely? And the whole spirit will go down. When we say temple worship standard, it doesn't just mean the deity worship, but it means how everyone is rising early, how everyone is enthusiastically participating in the kirtans, how the temple is being kept spotlessly clean. All these things should go on side by side. Book distribution that generates enthusiasm, and then everything is lifted up. To devotees in Laguna Beach, January 1977. Srila Prabhupada wrote, I have also heard that you are making plans for a very large order of my books from the BBT to be sold on a door-to-door basis on the style of the encyclopedia sales. If you can do this, it will revolutionize our book distribution and afford greater spreading of Krishna consciousness than any book distribution thus far. I want that every respectable person has a full set of Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita in his home. Yeah, the talk of selling Prabhupada's books door to door, just like encyclopedia sales. That was attempted. Some devotees did that in America and in Australia. Mahanidhi Prabhu, before he went to Vrindavan and became a sannyasi and then became a Babaji, but he used to go and sell sets of books to non-devotees. And Gopinath Acharya Prabhu used to do that in Australia. They used to find out people who are interested in mystic things or yoga, or they'd get contacts of interested people from book distributors, and they'd make an appointment by phone and go and visit them and sell them sets of books, full sets of Prabhupada's books. What Mahotsaha Prabhu and others based out of Atlanta are doing, they're just going right out in the public, distributing Prabhupada's books and finding people who are interested and just selling them sets of books right there on the spot. Can be done, should be done, must be done. Sets of books distributing among the Western public will revolutionize our book distribution, Prabhupada said. So, Srila Prabhupada wrote, now going back to a 1969 letter, so continue to push on as you are now doing, and as far as possible distribute our books and magazines. Now that our press is ready in Boston, we have more than 12 books which are ready to be printed. So with your help, I wish to overflood the marketplaces with our literatures. 12 books. That was a great milestone for Prabhupada, who, with tremendous endeavor, was able to produce single-handedly 3 volumes of his books, constituting the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Of course, he also printed prior to that the Easy Journey to Other Planets, but he brought to America these 3 volumes with tremendous difficulty, and now by 1969, with the help of his disciples, he has 12 books. And Prabhupada says that with your help, I wish to overflood the marketplaces with our literatures. Now we have so many others. We have the whole Bhagavatam, we have the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita, we have the Gita, Nectar of Devotion, and so many other books of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada wrote, now people are reading all kinds of nonsense books. All kinds of nonsense books. Go have a look on Amazon. All kinds of nonsense books. You don't even want to waste your time looking at the tremendous varieties of nonsense books. What did Srila Prabhupada say about this? Thus, their reading capacity is helping to pave their way through the circles of birth and death. If they will simply take to reading this transcendental literature we are presenting, the same reading capacity will elevate them to the highest perfection of spiritual life. This, of course, brings to mind the verses that Narada spoke to Vyasadeva. Nayad vachas chitra padang hare yasho jagat pavitram pragrinita karhichit tadvaya samtirtam ushanti manasa nayatra hangsa niramanti shikshaya. Those words which do not describe the glories of the Lord, who alone can sanctify the atmosphere of the whole universe, are considered by saintly persons to be like unto a place of pilgrimage for crows. Since the all-perfect persons are inhabitants of the transcendental abode, they do not derive any pleasure there. There are people who like reading all kinds of things with no relation to Krishna. They are like crows looking in the garbage. On the other hand, Tadvag Visargo Janataga Viplavo Yasmin Pratishlokam Abhadavhatyapi Namanyanantasya Yashonkitani Shrinvanti Gayanti Gurnanti Sadhavaha. On the other hand, that literature which is full of descriptions of the transcendental glories of the name, fame, forms, pastimes, etc. of the unlimited Supreme Lord is a different creation full of transcendental words directed toward bringing about a revolution in the impious lives of the world's misdirected civilization. Such transcendental literatures, even though imperfectly composed, are heard, sung, and accepted by purified men who are thoroughly honest. Where else will you find such depth? Where else will you find such profundity as in Srila Prabhupada's books? He wanted them distributed. Let us help in his mission to deliver the world to the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya by distributing his books far and wide. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha dante nidhaya chunakam padayo nipatyakritva chakarkushatam etadaham ravimi hey sadhava sakla eva vihaya durad gauranga chandra charane kurutanura Parivadatu jano yata tata va nanumakarana vayang vicharayamaha Harirasamadira madati mata bhuvi vilutama natama nirvishama Vibradvasa Kapishambhajya Naranyam Subhadaramanam Pravishakita Hare Krishna Hare Krishna